Okay, welcome back to Math 31. In this case, we're looking at section 1.4 notes. And the goal here is to learn how to round correctly and how to estimate and use estimation in some problems here. Okay, rounding numbers. What you do is, first of all, underline the specified digit. So if they ask you to round to the hundredths column, the hundreds column, you underline the hundreds column. And then you simply look next door to inform yourself whether you'll be rounding that underlined digit up or leaving it alone. Some people think you round down, but you never do round down in the column that you've got underlined. The overall number will round down sometimes. Okay, so let me dive right into this. We're supposed to be rounding to the nearest hundred, so I'm going to underline the hundreds column in both of these examples. There's an 8 in that column and a 3 in that hundreds column. Okay, in the first example, where we have a 7 next door to it, that indicates to us that we need to round that 8 up to 9. So it's going to be 3, 4, 9, and everything else turns into zeros. So that number rounds to 34,900 instead of 34,800, which would be the only other choice. This one is either going to be 6,300 or 6,400. And with the number that's next to it, that 2, anything 4 or lower, you don't make any change to the underlying digit. So we're going to keep the 6. The 3 does not change, and everything else becomes 0. So this one rounds to 6,300. Okay, we've got the same numbers as in the previous problem, but we're rounding to the nearest 1,000 this time. So I'm going to underline the 1,000 column in both of them. One has a 9 in it, and the other has a 4 in it. So 9,000 and 4,000. Now those will either round up or stay the same, and the digit next to it will tell us what to do here. Notice that I only care about the digit that I highlighted in pink there. So I don't even look at the numbers to the right of that. So 39,000, or do we bump up to 40,000 would be the question. And the 8 would indicate that you go up one more to 40,000. This will either be 4,000 or we bump it up to 5,000. And with a 3 next door, you leave it at 4,000 level. Okay, so the number 4,398, if you round it to the nearest 1,000, is closer to 4,000 than 5,000 is the idea. Okay, so on the next one here, it's almost as if you're writing the directions here. Was this rounded to the nearest 100,000, 10,000? Which one was it? Well, if you look at the digit, all the digits that zeroed out, okay, the one that we were concentrating on was that one right there, and that's in the 10,000 spot. So we rounded to the nearest 10,000 on that example. In this example, the 5 stayed static, and the reason it did is the 2 next door to it, and that happens to be in the hundreds column. So the nearest 100. In this next example, we've got a 3 that became a 4 here, and it was under the influence of that 5, which made it go up. That 3 that became a 4, we're dealing with a thousands column there, so that we rounded this to the nearest 1,000. Okay, consider only one digit when rounding. You don't go any further. So my point here is that if we're rounding this to the nearest 10,000, let me underline that digit, you're going to look strictly at the number next to it, that 4. Otherwise, you might be tempted to look next door and say, well, there's a 9 next door, which will make that 4 into a 5. No, don't do any of that. Just look at the 4, and that'll decide for you whether you round from 30,000 to 40,000 or just leave it at the 30,000 level for the nearest 10,000. Well, 30,000 is the right answer. Otherwise, you would look next door and that 9 would change it to 5 and that would bump it up. You don't do that. You just look at one digit to the right of the indicated column. Okay, estimate by rounding. This is an important skill. It's one of the higher level thinkings. When the accuracy of the answer is not really important, but you want a ballpark, then you can estimate before you add. And I'll illustrate that here. Now we're going to start by rounding to the nearest 100. And so if you round this one to the nearest 100, it's going to be 3,500. And the one below it is going to be 2,300. And let me illustrate that. This 3 has a 4 next to it. So you'd leave it, but this 4 had a 5 next to it, so that's why I chose to bump that one up. And now you have a little bit easier problem over here to do, and often this is done, and somebody can do this in their head. So your answer would be in the ballpark of 5,800, although I think it's actually quite a bit off in this case. So I'm going to go ahead and do it and show you how far off it is. 8 and 6 is 14. The next column adds to 10. The next column adds to 8, and I'll put a 0 up there. Well, let me do this again. 14, and I'm just double checking my work here. Yeah, that's pretty close, actually. That's very close. You're only 4 off out of 5,800 and some, okay? So this next column here, we're going to round to the nearest 100 again. This is going to be 83,000, closer to 500 than 600. This is either 6,800 or 6,900, and the case here is 6,900 because of the 7 that is next to that underlined digit there. This will either be 500 or closer to 600, and since it's only got a 2 next to it, we'll leave it at 500. And we're going to be adding these columns. So it's roughly 90,900 is our estimate here. Let me double check my work here. I'm just double checking here. Hopefully it's right. Okay, I do make mistakes, so I check my work quite often, and I'll teach you some of the techniques I use to check. Okay, estimate the total distance between two cities if the distance between them is a combination of the following exact distances. Okay, 32 plus, so we're just adding these, okay? And we're going to estimate to the nearest 10 miles. So 32 rounds to about 30. Here's our estimate. 280 when you round it, 282 when you round it to the nearest 10 is 280, and the 2 doesn't, 280. The closest 10 miles, it's either 130. I'm looking at this one here, 130 or 140. It's closer to 140. And finally, 8 is closer to 10 than 0. So you add the columns here. And this next one here is, let's see, 11 and 5 is 16, roughly 460 miles. Okay, this last one here is a chart that comes from immigration statistics. It'd be 1929. That's roughly when my grandfather came over from Germany, and all the way to 1933. So you have a 5-year stretch here. And these are people who came in through Ellis Island legally, and we had a big influx of immigration. Now you can see a really big drop between 1930 and 1931. The Great Depression kind of took away people's ability to travel across the Atlantic. Okay, so we're going to be rounding to the nearest 10,000 to estimate this. So 20,000 or 30,000 we have to decide here, and 23 with 3 would just keep it at 20,000. We're going to go with either 30,000 or 40,000 on this one, and the 5 makes us choose the higher one. Anything 5 or higher, you bump it up. Okay, 97,000 when you round up is going to it's either going to be 90,000 or 100,000, and this will be 100,000. we're rounding to the nearest. Okay, this 4 there, we're either going up or down, and the one next door says, I'm sorry, up or leave it alone. We're going to leave it alone, 240,000. And then this next one here, you're either going to say 270,000 or bump it up to 280,000. And 280,000 would be the appropriate estimate there if you're going to the nearest 10,000. Okay, we're going to add these all up, and we've got a lot of zeros here that we can just fill in, which is part of why estimating helps. You can do that quickly. Okay, and the next column, I'm going to highlight it here in pink, adds up to, let's see, 18. And with the carry mark, these numbers add up to 6. So 680,000 immigrants is a good estimate of how many came in during that 5-year stretch between the two world wars and kind of right in the middle of the beginning of the Great Depression. So we still had a lot of people coming in to the United States as the Great Depression kind of set in. 1929 is when the first year the market crashed, and then the unemployment, really dire stuff, was in the early 30s. And you can see the numbers of immigrants just dwindled because the influence of the United States on the rest of the world's economy also set in, and so people couldn't even buy passage to come to the United States. Okay, so that does it for the notes for Math 31, section 1.4.